Hello, everyone.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just trying to make it so that you can present.
Great. It just dawned on me right before this that I haven't given a presentation in a while, and I'm slightly nervous.
Oh, no, I'm sure you're going to kill it because I feel like you know this by the back of your hand, so
Thank you.
I have confidence. All right, so can you see if you can share?
I can. It looks like I can at least.
Okay, awesome. So I will put myself on mute and you are free to start whenever you want. I think we still got like a minute or so, but anytime after that, you're welcome to start.
Okay. Do we think more people are going to pop in or?
I think so. That's why I turned off the doorbell because we have I think 30 people who are signed up, so they might be coming in a little bit late.
Okay, I'll give everyone a few minutes to pop in, and
Okay.
then we can go from there.
All right, and I will put out the announcements on our Slack channel and stuff, so, or our Teams channel, so to let everybody know we're getting ready to get started.
Okay.
Thank you.
While we're waiting, does anyone currently on the call have any experience with automation?
That sounds like a no. I don't see anyone typing.
Yeah, I took that as a no too.
Like this, I'm sitting over here like, does test automation count? Because that's all I got for you.
Yeah. So automation is such a big, large word that has so many different contexts. So in this case, we could, in the context of DAS testing, so dynamic application security testing, while we don't look for confirmation and yes, something worked as expected, we do kind of fall under the category of test automation. Was that too long-winded?
Absolutely not. I actually had a conversation the other day. We were talking about fuzzing, and we were talking about like kind of similarly, does this, kind of fall under, who does it fall under? Is it like a testing thing or is it a security testing type of thing? I'm always just interested in, who's using the automation.
Yeah, it overlaps in a lot of different areas. I will give everyone one more minute and then.
Okay.
So I thought for today we could go over general terms of automation and then slowly focus on software automation and then dig down into mobile application. I have a couple of slides, but I didn't want to be too heavy on the slides because I want this to be an interactive chat. As everyone learns the best through those than just having somebody lecture. And then I thought we could look through some Appium examples and how we target UI elements. So I can go ahead and get started.
That sounds like a plan to me. I will go ahead and mute everybody. This is Corey, and she's from NowSecure, and her focus is on automation, and I'm very happy to have her with us today. So she's going to get started.
And Besker, so there's another individual, Besker. He is one of my automation engineers as well, and he's going to come in and check me if I get too detail-oriented and lose sight of the basics, because that can definitely happen sometimes. All right, great. So let's start with my little presentation here. Get this out of the way. Automation in general is a term or technology that basically requires minimal human input. So the whole point of automating things is so that we don't have to keep having a human do something over and over again. There are 4 basic categories of automation when we're talking in general, which is basic automation, automating simple tasks, redundant tasks, things that happen over and over again. You may come across terms such as business process management or robotic process automation. those are less relevant to us, more into like the general administration side of things when it comes to businesses. There's process automation, which is sort of sequential actions that occur. Software automation can fall under basic automation or process automation, integration automation, and artificial intelligence automation. And I will share these slides with you in case you want these terms for later process. There are some links in here to IBM's standard definition of these. I figured they would be a good company to pull this information from. A lot of people nowadays are focusing on the artificial intelligence portion of automation because while it's great to identify sequential processes that we don't want to do on a daily basis, we also kind of want to start digging into how can we make things more intelligent so that we don't have to keep an eye on them or keep re-automating or re-scripting things over and over again. So NowSecure in general is starting to play around with this just a little bit with machine learning and computer vision. So there's a lot of exciting things coming out with artificial intelligence in the area of automation. But today we're just going to focus on process automation. So what are some of the criteria for automation? We want it to be repeatable. We want it to be determinate, meaning that every time we run the test, we want the same outcome to occur. And we want it to be unopinionated, which seems quite obvious, but we can't automate testing how users feel about something. Anytime a human opinion comes into play, that's something that we're not going to automate because it requires a human. So any questions, comments about just general automation terms, criteria? Cool beans. So whenever we get into software testing, which is we're going to kind of shift gears and focus just on software testing, there are two different categories that things fall into most of the time, which is black box testing or white box testing. Black box testing means that we can only see what a typical user sees. So whenever we're doing mobile app security testing, oftentimes the developer of the code doesn't give us access to the code. We're trying to hack it and look deeper into an application just from a user's perspective. This includes behavioral testing, functional testing, and dynamic testing. Then there's white box testing, which means we're looking at the source code, we're testing the functions within it, we're testing units, and we're doing a general code analysis. So those are the two different areas that you'll primarily hear about whenever it comes to software testing. There's a lot more that comes along with that, but we're just going to stick with these basics so far. So for focus on mobile application, AppSec, black box testing, we want to ask ourselves, how do we test an application without having access to the code? How we do this is we target the UI. Has anyone ever seen what an application's UI looks like? If not, that's okay. Come over here, go over here, there we go. So there are a couple different tools that we can use to look at the UI. There is Xcode for Mac for iOS applications. There's another tool called Appium. That's what we're going to look at today. That's the best out-of-the-box UI tool that you can get. But there's a lot of other things that you can do around automation and UI testing. You can develop your own tools, you can modify tools, but today we're just going to look at Appium. So Appium has a server that will connect to either an Android device or an iOS device. We're going to look at Android first. And then to launch applications, we just need some requirements, which is we need to know the device name, the platform name. We need to look up an apps package. Has anyone ever looked up an app package or app activities before? These two can be derived from ADB, which I am hoping, has anyone played with ADB? Okay, well, we could circle back to ADB if nobody's ever played with it before. But once we have these base criteria, we can launch an application. So we'll start a session. I have a local device connected to my computer, and I probably don't have this. Let's do this one. And you should be able to launch any application that's on your device. Okay, so we launched Google Chrome. It automatically launches the application, and we can go through and click and look at the different elements that occur within the application. And these are the pieces that we're going to target whenever we write our black box UI testing. So the structure is typically layered, and there are different categories that elements sit in. This probably isn't the best example. Let's try something else. I'm just going to look at a different application. The great thing about mobile apps is they're constantly changing. And if you leave something on your device for too long, it says that it's out of date. Okay, so here's another example of entering in text fields. You know, the pop-up is text boxes. We typically target class, XPath, clear text. So any thoughts around what I've shared so far? Okay. Nobody's got it so far, and I'm going through this faster than I thought I was. So how this plays into mobile app security testing is my team will write these UI automations, and the app will go through its different process. It will log into the application. It will sometimes check user information, submit fields, buy tickets. The reason we automate all of these things is so that we don't have to keep manually typing it in and running a security test over and over. We could just focus on the security aspect of testing the application or trying to hack it in multiple different ways without actually having to step through a workflow. Let's see. Where does everyone want to go from here? Is everyone just flabbergasted so far?
I just think we're all just taking it in.
Okay. I do have some automations to show you, but I'm trying to think of what is the best balance here. So when everyone is going through the hacking process or attempting to find vulnerabilities with an application, how do you currently exercise it? How do you look at applications? Okay, give me a second. I want to think. Besker, what do you think is the next best thing to walk through?
I think the best thing, you mean to this application right now, the best thing I would say, enter in the text and try to log in so you can see the inside of the applications, what's going on and what you can see after you log in automatically, I would say.
Okay, let's try. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to grab one for an app really fast to show some of the processes that we walk through. Okay, you know, we can write an automation while we're here too. So let's try to write one, see how everyone feels about it. Does everyone have experience with Python? Have we ever used or played around with Python before? Okay. No worries if you haven't. I'm going to walk you through some of the functionality that we've added, that we've showcased, that can go through some of the hurdles of testing mobile applications. One of them, and the most important one, is elasticity. There's a lot of variables that come with testing, such as connection to the back end of a mobile application, the stability of Wi-Fi. In our case, we automate the testing process in general, so it comes with routing to devices and the stability of devices. So part of that process is creating an automation that is flexible enough that it can adapt to different latency environments. So we created functions such as a wait for function. It takes our driver element that we take, we let it know its path directive. Path directives, especially with Appium, exist within 3 different categories. There's an ID, which is developers input whenever they actually generate elements and buttons to click on within an application. There's an X path, which is its full path through the hierarchy to the element itself. These are extremely taxing when it comes to test. So if you have a huge suite of automations that you're writing, you may want to avoid X path, just because it can clog up the latency of multiple tests running over and over again. There are ways in which you can utilize XPath and target elements specifically, but the majority of the time we tried generic XPath and IDs. The other one is an accessibility ID, but those aren't set for everyone all the time. So I don't think there's no accessibility IDs in here. So we have an application. Whenever we first launch it, we get to this screen here. We'll want to enter in an email. This is actually to get started. So we want to sign into an account here. So we'll want to click this button and this ID button. So what we would do in a script is we would say, driver, what else are we looking for? Some sort of string. And then await variable. So we're going to give this 30 seconds to potentially play out. The wait for function will actually return an element itself, so we can produce actions as well. Actions consist of tapping, sending text, swiping, basically anything that a human can do on a mobile application. We can somehow mimic that within Appium itself. And Appium is a public-facing tool, so you could just Google any sort of Appium command or potential, and there's either a Stack Overflow on it or an actual Appium documentation on how to use something. So the first thing is we'll want the element string type. We're going to use ID. So we'll just take this full string and pass it along to it. And then we're going to give it ID. Now, once again, this is something that we have generated internally, but for just looking at what it's doing standard, we're looking at the driver. Driver has find element by ID, find elements by XPath, find elements by accessibility ID. These are the 3 primary ones. And then we're passing it the identifier that it's looking for. And that identifier typically goes through these pieces here, which is like element ID, index, text, which is what we target a lot of the time, resource IDs, These are the elements that it's going through, and that's what we're passing it. So that will return an element, and then we will attempt to click on it. Let me grab. Appium server is running in the background. Let me see if I. So we'll want to grab the bundle ID. This is called clear. This application here, we need to update our bundle ID and activities. Typically, whenever you step into an application, you want to step into its very first activity. It'll oftentimes show up as a splash activity. And there are many ways that you can find activities. I just used this ADB shell command. I set up an alias. Part of automation is not just writing automations. We tend to be very lazy people. So we set up as many aliases as we can. We automate our internal processes as much as we can because we hate going through and having to do them over and over again. So then we'll include this. We can save it and run it. I can probably. Pfizer is a great application to be able to view your mobile devices on your screen that are local to you. So I'll use Visme to locate this, and then we saved our test automation, and we can go through and watch how it launches it. So this is the Appium server, and this is an Appium tool. So I have the server launching in the background, and I can run my automation in the front. This we come across quite a bit, which is having splash activities lead to areas that you didn't expect them to lead to. So it's setting it up can be a little bit of a trial and error, but once you get an automation working, it should be the last time you have to edit it and go through it. So if you were tasked to just set or test specific workflows, you can have these workflows working in the background while you're running your tests in the foreground, which could be a little bit more of a manual process. iOS is a little bit harder with Appium. We tend to use Xcode for iOS, but Xcode is basically the same thing. You'll look at elements and buttons for different items. There is a tool called an accessibility inspector here. And whenever you look at elements through your accessibility inspector, they show up a lot like Appium do, which is, let's go into something. The hardest apps to work on are Flutter apps. Does anyone know what Flutter is?
No, we're not familiar with that. What is that?
So Flutter is a development tool that basically allows you to develop across platforms. So you can do Android and iOS at the same time, and it works from a JavaScript base. So the biggest issue with Flutter is that elements rarely ever show up. It just shows up as a web space or a web element, and there are no actual elements to click on. So we have to use a lot of coordinates for those applications. But we're seeing it more and more just because people don't want to use native app development. But if we look at, so here I've tapped on an element on my screen. The app is called SugarWad. And the same with how it shows up in a lot of different spaces. It's the text is login, that's the label, that's the button. So whenever we actually go to write the automation, we reference them similarly, such as app buttons, static text, different actions that we have. It's a lot of the same thing across the two different languages and the two different tools. So
Where do you
that
find
is-
yourself dealing with more iOS or Android? I mean, you have the two softwares that deal with them respectively, but which one do you work on the most?
So iOS has a lot more challenges when it comes not just to, I spend most of my day troubleshooting applications, not just writing automations. And I find iOS troubleshooting to be way more interesting and sort of harder to deal with because when you're looking to install applications on your phone, there's a lot of different issues that could come up. One is re-signing and making sure that you have all the attributes that you need cloned properly. There's also, we primarily work on iPads, so sometimes there's inconsistencies with working from an iPad to an iPhone and or jailbreak detections. We're oftentimes bypassing jailbreak detections. Usability wise, I typically just stick with Xcode when it comes to writing UI test for iOS apps, and then I go with Appium for Android. Setting up Appium for iOS can be a little bit tricky and can take an afternoon if you don't have the steps down exactly the way that they're supposed to go. I can walk through, we have templates that we set up, but I can walk through building a new exe test. So you do file new, you want a new project. So this pops up. You can do multiple platforms. We just need iOS. We are going to just do an application. It needs to be a single page blank application. Product name.
When doing the multiple one, are you able to run them at the same time, side by side, or how does that work?
Can you define multiple one?
Well, this is the Flutter thing you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that it's cross-platform, like it can go iOS or it can go Android, right?
Yes, so Flutter is a development tool. It's not a testing or a UI tool. Basically, it just produces two applications from one source code.
Okay.
The limitations of testing multiple applications on multiple different devices on a single laptop, you'll have port issues and connectivity issues if you attempt to do that.
Okay,
that
gotcha.
helps.
That's what I was like alluding to. I see what you're saying.
Sure. I mean, there's even when it comes to connecting to a device. So Appium uses its UI tools and ADB will use separate UI tools. So a lot of times we've created our own internal tool process using ADB. And I would love to go to that with everyone. However, that's IP and we can't dig into it as deeply as I wish we could, because it will give you an example of how you can use a basic tool like ADB to interact with a mobile application, which is what we use for that section. How we use Appium is it's pretty much siloed in our platform. I believe that we gave out platform. Did we give out Mobileverse or platform tokens to anyone? I thought we did. But anyway, we've learned to silo Appium separate to all of our other test automations. So that's, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyhow, you can set up your, back to this, you could set up your Xcode project however you want to. But basically, you're just going to create a blank app And everything that you do will fall under the UI test scenarios here. And it's definitely worth playing around with because you get to understand launch sequences, different functionality, and how the UI test interacts with your general application. So they can be built side by side, but you can also just build an independent test suite for some random application that you have without having access to its source code. From here, we've talked about latency, a lot of other things that you need. So stable application, stable connections to backend, stable Wi-Fi, you need login credentials. Some barriers to automation that we currently have are one-time passwords and CAPTCHA. We're definitely working on trying to figure out how to go past those. Biometrics are a hindrance as well. Those are pretty much the standards, any sort of anti-automation features that exist. Those are things to be aware of, but also being able to just test an application dynamically, you're going to need those things anyway. So it just comes with the territory of, let's get the credentials we need for testing, and they're probably the same that we need for automation as well. There are 11 chats. Besker, what's some of the unfinished things that we left for Android?
I would say we did not go into the app because you were talking about the activities. Sometimes I will show different activities that's not showing the right activities. I was thinking, could I show there's other ways that we can find both activities, like the app act dump functionality that we use to find the app package and the actual activities when we actually do it manually, when you launch the app.
Okay, yeah, you're right. We can show that as well. So what Besker is talking about, we have this, I wanted to add some. Appium isn't the only way to look at elements. There's also, you can look at them through ADB. So here's the frustrating part of some of this is I have to close out of my Appium servers to access ADB. So let's go right here and do this. Let's see, I think I can. I'm going to pull up my aliases so this isn't confusing for everyone. So here are some ADB commands that we can use. Besker is referring to this, what we call dump UI, which is dumping the UI hierarchy from whatever view that we're looking at. And this is done via a script. So the command for pulling, so here's the command. So ADB shell UI automator dump. This is the command. And then we parse through it so that we can see it a little bit easier and it automatically opens up. So this is an example of a basic automation because we don't want to go through each one of these lines every single time. So there's also a lot of automation that you can do to make your work easier. So what this does is we can look at basically all the information that we looked at through Appium without having to start the server and stepping through each screen. We can just target exactly what we need to look at. This is a simpler path for doing it. And you get the same information: text, resource ID, class, packages, content description. You know, is it checkable? Is it checked, clickable, enabled? Basically everything you need to know about elements within an application as you're trying to walk through it. Thanks, Bhaskar, for pulling that up. Was there anything else that you could think of?
You can use Appium as well if you want to, when you're writing the script while there's an automation. So you can add driver that get page source, so you can get the source code of the app without actually stopping the automation. I think it's in the test.py. I don't know if you have it. If you do driver that get page source, it will give you the same code that you're just showing right now with the dump, but
Okay.
to you while running through the application. So you don't have to stop specifically.
I don't think we've walked through this before. You mean just within your code?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you the code.
Okay. There are so many different ways to look at these pieces. So that's app automation itself. There are also automation can be used as like this, being able to do quick tasks around your computer. There's no shame in writing shells and scripts. We have tools for just about everything that you can think of, from pulling apps from app stores, downloading them to your device, uploading them to our platforms. Basically, whatever you can do to make your day-to-day life easier. Automate it, write a script. Python is a super easy language to get into, and you could do almost anything with it. That, I think, is all that I have for general automation, but I would love to, if everyone wants to, toss questions or concepts or ideas back and forth, I'm more than happy to have just a general chat for the last 20 minutes. I do recommend starting with Python. I started with a language. I started with C, and C is great for learning foundation, just in general how things work. But as far as breadth of capabilities, you can't go wrong with Python, and it's a pretty easy language to start with. What languages do people use now?
I think a lot of people use JavaScript nowadays, like mainly JavaScript for a lot of stuff.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand the question of in NowSecure YouTube channel later.
I think they were answering the questions to where it's recorded session gonna be sent it to what YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Tanisha, were you going to publish the recording, or was that something that NowSecure wants to publish?
I'm not sure.
If NowSecure,
I believe that this would be published on our website. It generally is, unless you wanted to do that. I don't know what, if you rather do it.
Sure. We actually have a whole team of individuals that their job is to make tutorials and record them and make them great presentations for YouTube quality. And if I'm more than happy to partner with that team, and let's put something formal together, and we could put it up on our YouTube channel for people to reference later.
Yeah, I'll definitely get with Tanisha, and we'll let you know shortly in regards to that.
Okay. Any other questions around automation? Can we think of, are there any repetitive tasks that anyone does on a daily basis that they think would be a good candidate for automation?
I think in general, for those that are searching for employment, I mean, job searching, on specific sites, take for instance, like an Indeed, You know, I know, I look at it daily. Is there any automation that could be done to that to send, certain job postings directly and that without all the rest? I mean, I know you can do it through Indeed itself, but like, can this be utilized to like, pull out certain jobs and automate that task? So I know that's basically what a lot of job seekers are doing. I mean, if we can automate that task from different platforms, Indeed, you got Dice, you got all the different ones. I mean, can that be done?
Absolutely. Especially computational wise on the internet, anything that has a specific sequence of steps that can be reproduced over and over again, it's a candidate for automation. So in that instance, what you'd probably, are you thinking about the submission process or just the process of combing through and looking for certain terms within a job description?
More sort of certain terms. I mean, the submission part would be, I don't know that will work out very well because not every job posting requires the same type of input. So I think more so along the lines of just getting back to certain job titles and things like that through the different platforms.
Somebody did have it they said it in the Slack, it's considered a web scraper or a crawler. Python, and there's a tool called Selenium. Those would probably be the best two tools to use for something like that. So I would say if you're interested in doing something along those lines, you start on a piece of paper, walk through each one of the steps that you go through in the process of looking for the ideal job. So if you're going to go to a web page, you got to go to that web page, make sure you're signed in, make sure you look for a keyword, and then you can scroll through the descriptions. Has anyone ever used a web inspector before? So there's this tool called, I'm not sharing. Sorry, let me share and then I can walk you through this. So you'll want to walk through each of the processes step by step. I mean, make them as granular as possible because those are the steps you're going to want to make within your code. Web crawling is a lot easier than app crawling because you get a lot more information whenever you inspect a web page. So all of the elements that are in here and descriptions that are in here, we can actually go to Indeed. Let's look up. Okay, so we can search. It's been a hot minute since I've been on it. Indeed. We can probably click on. So if we inspect elements here, this is also just good to play around with. If you've ever done any web hacking, you've probably been in this area before. And if you click option and the button, it drops everything down. But a lot of what is in these descriptions here are listed over in the elements themselves, and it's a lot of string comparison. So if there's a description that you like that you want to look through, you can just parse through the string descriptions of them and then generate a list of URLs to go visit to. That's definitely a possibility. But most of the information that you're going to look for is actually stored within the elements of the inspect portion. And a Selenium driver can crawl through all of those pieces. Did that help at all? Or did that just add more confusion?
No, that definitely helped. Thank you.
In the past, there are ways of having, if you've never used a regular expression before, especially within Python, you can use regex to pull specific strings out of long text fields. So I don't see it here, but if we click on something, let's see if it goes. Okay, so all of this information here is probably going to show up as a long string. And in that long string, I don't know why it didn't do what I wanted it to do. Most of the time, yeah, these things pop up in long strings and you can just comb through them with a regex. There are a lot of regex practice tools online. You just type in regex like this, tester 101, and it can tell you how to build regular expression. These are one of the most powerful things you can use, especially in automation or any sort of validation when you have a lot of information. This is the fastest way to go about it. Any other scenarios anyone would like to talk about or discuss? I can show you an example of, let's see, kind of something similar where using regex comes into play. Tools and defaults. So let's see, a lot of times with our NowSecure platform, we want to look at, say, an entire group. There, for instance, recently I tested 250 apps. So part of the automation process is we want to go through, we went through and pulled all 250 applications from the App Store just by providing a list of applications and their bundle IDs. So this here, we automated that process. And so we wanted to make clear like what we're passing it, how we're passing data to it, but we don't want to go through and add each one of those apps over, through the whole process. So we actually just used the API to automate it. Some of the other things that we automated whenever we looked at that process is using an API, we pulled data from assessments such as scores, error messages, logs, like data logs from within the application themselves. And eventually we got to the point where we pull that information, it becomes very sequential, and then we take and use regular expressions to parse through the actual message log, and the message log can be, 1,000 lines long. And so we use regular expressions to look for very specific strings, and then we pull all the results for those strings out. And we can do it for thousands of apps at a time without having to go through and look at them each one. So for instance, if you were testing an app and you were using automation to run through the application and you looked at the console logs, you could theoretically pump all of the console logs into a single document and then automate checking the console logs. So if no one's ever played with console logs, every time there's a process on a device, it will go through and log the background activity, the foreground activity. It will match any errors that go through that process. So nobody wants to go through these manually. So this is something that you could produce to a file and then automate searching through it using regular expressions. So those are some other ideas. I mean, really the limitation to your creativity is the limit of automation at this point, as long as it's a sequential process that can be reproduced. There's probably some way to automate it. Let's see, I'm seeing if there's.
So it looks like there's a question whether or not certification is favored for this skill, for this career.
Yeah, I am the worst person to ask for that because I'm a doer and a forget to documenter. So I would say a certification never hurts. But also having a good code base to show what you've automated and how you've automated it is a good path. whenever we talk about automation as a career, though, it's good to pick a lane and become a master in it. For my automation engineers at NowSecure, because of what we do is so unique, a lot of times software automation will end up in somewhere in the QA field if that's not your interest. There are other areas that you can go into, and that's where the test automations come in. That's where, learning to scrape the web, create a bot, all of those things that are still fall under the category of automation are going to take you in a different direction. Machine learning and computer vision analysis is definitely the future of automation, and I would say industry in the future. So if those are two things that interest you, I would recommend getting in while those things are still in the development phase, because that is the future of where we're going. I don't know if there's any certification on those two topics, though. There probably is.
So did you mean that you pull data from mobile apps, not websites?
We pull data from both. There's a lot of different paths that you can pull data. You can pull data through APIs, which a lot of APIs feed websites. If you don't have that information, you can pull through the HTML sources that are on a page, or you can navigate through an application and pull data through there as well. It just depends on what you're trying to do.
All right. Any other, are there any certifications for automation? I think she said that she wasn't sure, but then you could maybe set up like a GitHub or something with your code so you can be able to talk about the automations you've done and what they were used for. Let me see if there's any other questions that I missed. Nope. All right. Any other questions? If not, we will call.
Sure. I would say this is a very broad topic, and I tried to narrow it down as much as possible. However, Tanisha, if you want to share my email address out with people, if you come up with some questions, or if you are just pondering the topic in general, feel free to email me, and I'm more than happy to communicate back and forth.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. We appreciate your time for coming out here. Thank you also, Besker, for coming to assist, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Well,
Thanks.
before we go, can I share some resources with you guys? I think it might be helpful if you some people are interested in
Absolutely.
automation. Because I said it in the chat. It's called Test Automation University. So they have a lot of things that Corey talked about. So if anybody want to dive deeper into it, they might find some things in there that's really interesting. I put it in the chat about it to look at.
It's a really cool website, Besker.
Yeah, it's like they have different like Selenium, like Corey was talking about earlier. And it's like you can learn on your own pace, and a lot of them are videos, and it's free. And they give you certifications.
This is cool.
Oh, that's
I didn't
good
even
to
know
know.
that was a thing.
I didn't either.
Now I'm fascinated too. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
All right.
Besker. Thanks
All
for
right. Well, I will
your
share
time.
your I will share your contact information if anybody would like it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.